He did not just kick a woman, he kicked the ghost of the person he once tried to erase. From the narrator's omniscient view, this is not merely revenge fantasy. It is a story about power reversing itself. Derek once reduced Lily to fear, hunger, and silence. But in one brutal instant, inside that glittering department store, the past returns only to discover that its victim has become untouchable. And when Lorenzo Marchetti arrives, the real shock is not the violence. It is the collapse of an abuser's illusion that he still controls the woman he destroyed.
Heels. A $5,000 Ferragamo loafer connects with her ribs, the impact of percussive shock before the mind can even name the assault. Lily is propelled into a Tiffany & Co. vitrine, heels, and a cascade of shattered crystal descends as she collapses onto the polished marble. Her coat is torn, her elbow split open by glass. For one drawn-out second, the entire ecosystem of Saks Fifth Avenue freezes, heels. The faint sound of holiday music persists, a tinny counterpoint to a tableau where no one moves, where no one seems to breathe. From the floor, with blood tracing a path down her arm, Lily's gaze rises to meet the man looming over her, heels. His handsome features are contorted by a mask of pure revulsion. Derek Sullivan, her past personified. The architect of her ruin 4 years prior, now hissing at her to remain on the floor, to embody the filth he perceives her to be, heels. He has no framework for what he is actually witnessing, no context for the fact that the fractured girl he remembers is an echo, a ghost. The one who had pleaded for him to stay, heels, who had lost their child alone on the grime-caked floor of a subway lavatory, who had contemplated stepping into traffic to silence the noise, who had weathered a New York winter on $5 in sheer will, heels. He is blind to the woman who was forged in that crucible. He cannot sense the 10-carat diamond concealed by her glove, nor can he imagine the penthouse she commands atop Manhattan's highest spire, or the limitless black Amex nestled in her purse, heels. And Derek Sullivan is utterly ignorant of the other man, the one to whom she is legally bound, whose security detail is at this moment pinning him to a counter, the man whose name is lighting up her phone, Renzo Marchetti, her husband, heels. The most feared Mafia capo in all of New York, the sovereign of the Marchetti crime syndicate, an organization with tendrils reaching from the heights of Wall Street to the shadowed recesses of Brooklyn, heels. As Lily's trembling fingers finally accept the call, Lorenzo's voice, a thing colder than the winter air outside, demands to know who laid a hand on her. One can observe the understanding dawn on Derek's face as a physical event, heels. The blood drains from it. His eyes widen with a primal, unadulterated terror. He has just brutalized the wrong woman. And in approximately 10 minutes, when Lorenzo's motorcade of black SUVs glides into the private garage, heels. When 30 of his men in bespoke suits flood this floor, when the most formidable figure in the New York underworld meets the man who struck his wife, Derek Sullivan will learn the true definition of consequence, heels. It will cost him his entire existence, his career, his reputation, his liberty, and very nearly heels his life. But he cannot grasp this yet. In this precise moment, his expensive shoe still poised as if to strike again, he believes he is looking at a non-entity. He sees only the pathetic creature he discarded like refuse 4 winters ago, heels. That perception is about to be irrevocably shattered. This is the precipice we will explore, a study in love, retribution, and the violent recalibration of power. So settle in, heels. We must bear witness to what occurs when karma arrives in a 3-piece Armani suit, ready to collect a debt, heels. 6 hours earlier, the first light of a winter morning strikes the steel and glass titans of New York. Within a walk-in closet the size of a studio apartment she once would have considered a fantasy, stands Lily Carter, heels. Ranks of designer clothing are arrayed like a silent, opulent army. Chanel, Dior, Valentino, Gucci, each garment representing more than her former annual rent. Yet Lily's hands bypass this arsenal, selecting a simple cream-colored knit dress, heels. Arguably the most understated piece in the entire collection. She smooths the soft fabric, feeling its texture. Even after 2 years immersed in this reality, a part of her remains an outsider looking in. A part of her understands it always will, heels. The survival instincts etched into the psyche during times of desperation are permanent marks, invisible scars that ache in quiet moments, heels. The memory of scavenging for loose change to buy a single loaf of bread is still visceral. The chill of the homeless shelter floor where she once slept is a sensation her body has not forgotten. This phantom of want, heels. This ghost of hopelessness. It doesn't simply vanish with wealth. It recedes into the deep parts of the self, waiting for a moment of quiet to resurface. As she fastens the final button, a deep, resonant voice emerges from the doorway. Feels. Lorenzo Marchetti is there, leaning against the massive oak frame, his dark Italian eyes observing her with a look of profound adoration mingled with a curious sense of powerlessness. He is already impeccable in a charcoal Tom Ford suit. Feels. His dark hair slicked back, revealing the thin scar above his left eye. Feels. He is the very image of a GQ cover model, if the magazine published a special edition for lethally attractive Mafia dons. "You're doing it again," he observes, his voice a low hum. Lily turns, her green eyes locking with his reflection in the mirror. Feels. "Doing what?" she queries. As Lorenzo crosses the room, he radiates an almost tangible aura of command and absolute self-possession. "You always choose the most unassuming thing in here," he says, his tone softening. Feels. "That dress is likely the least expensive garment you possess." I have to wonder, why does the wife of Lorenzo Marchetti dress with the frugality of a woman watching her pennies? A small smile, one reserved exclusively for him, touches Lily's lips. Feels. "I prefer simplicity." He moves behind her, his powerful arms encircling her waist, drawing her flush against his chest. Feels. His warm breath ghosts her ear as he murmurs, "You are married to one of the wealthiest men in New York. You could possess anything, absolutely anything in this world, and yet you conduct yourself as if you are living on a fixed allowance." Feels. Lily leans her head back against his shoulder, replying, "Wealth doesn't redefine me, Lorenzo. I am still Lily, the same woman you first met in that hospital ward." He presses a kiss to the side of her neck. Feels. Directly over the pulse point that has begun to quicken, whispering, "That is precisely why I love you. But it does not negate my desire to give you all that you are owed. I would hand you the world, if only you would take it." Lily turns within his embrace. Feels. Placing a hand on his chest, feeling the steady rhythmic beat of his heart. Feels. "You've already given me something far greater than the world," she tells him. "You gave me a sanctuary. You gave me a family. You gave me a reason to continue living." The glacial quality in Lorenzo's eyes, the one he presents to the rest of humanity, Feels, thaws completely under her gaze. "You did the same for me," he responds, his voice low. "Before you, I was merely existing. I was not truly alive." They stand for a long moment in the quiet morning light. Feels. Two fractured souls who had discovered in each other the means to become whole. Lily is completely unaware that in a matter of hours, the past she believed she had interred is set to erupt into her present, dragging with it all its attendant pain. Feels. But in that moment, held in Lorenzo's arms, she felt secure. Feels. She felt cherished. She had no inkling that these were the final moments of peace before the maelstrom. Reluctantly, Lorenzo releases her, though his hands remain on her shoulders as if he cannot tolerate severing the connection. Feels. "What are your plans for the day?" he asks. Lily informs him, "Saks Fifth Avenue for some Christmas shopping. I need to find gifts for everyone, and perhaps something for you." Lorenzo merely arches an eyebrow. Feels. A motion that makes the scar above it shift. "You need not buy me anything," he states. "I possess everything I could ever desire. You are all I require." Lily playfully taps his chest, calling him a charmer, but Lorenzo's smile vanishes. Feels, his tone turning serious. "You will take Nico and Dante with you." Feels. Lily sighs, a quiet exhalation of resignation. She had anticipated this. "I'm merely going shopping," she protests. "I hardly need bodyguards shadowing me as if I were a head of state." Lorenzo gently cups her chin, his touch both tender and unyielding. Feels, compelling her to meet his gaze directly. "You are aware of who I am," he says, his voice flat and devoid of negotiation. "You understand my business. You know the number of enemies the Marchetti family has accrued. Every single day," Feels, "someone wishes for my death, and the most efficient path to me is through you. I will not permit that risk to your safety. Ever. This is not a point of discussion." Feels. Lily looks into his dark eyes and sees the one emotion Lorenzo Marchetti never reveals to the world, unvarnished fear. Feels. The most formidable mafia boss in New York, a man who inspires terror throughout the entire criminal underworld, is fundamentally terrified of losing her. She understands. She understands completely, Feels, for she carries the same fear for him each day, the dread of receiving the call that he will not be coming home, and so her own tone softens. "Are two men truly necessary?" Lorenzo's reply is instantaneous. "I wish to send 10, Feels, but I knew you would object. 2 is our compromise. It is the absolute minimum I can abide." Lily recognizes that tone. When he speaks like that, the matter is closed. That is not her husband speaking. It is Lorenzo Marchetti, The head of the family. Feels. She offers a simple nod. Feels. All right, she concedes. Nico and Dante will accompany me. The tension visibly drains from Lorenzo's frame. He leans down to press a soft, warm kiss to her forehead. He whispers, thank you. Thank you for understanding. Lily looks up. Feels. Meeting his lips for a brief, firm kiss. I understand. I will always understand. But you must promise me your own caution. Promise me you will come home tonight. Lorenzo's lips curve into that dangerous smile. Feels. The one whose softer edges are reserved for her alone. I promise, he says. I will be home by 7. We have reservations at 8. Lily asks him their destination. Lorenzo just winks, replying, it's a surprise. Feels. But Lorenzo's mind was only on the red one, the dress he was already mentally divesting from her form. After 2 full years, the heat still rose in Lily's cheeks. She called him ridiculous. Lorenzo responded with a low, feels, rumbling laugh filled with unspoken promises, vowing that he would never tire of her, not in this life or any that might follow. He kissed her then, deeper and longer, as if committing the sensation of her to memory. He pulled back and moved to the door, feels, but paused on the threshold. He turned, his gaze locking with hers one last time. He told her that if anything at all, felt remotely amiss, she was to call him, without hesitation. Lily nodded, affirming that she would. Feels. Lorenzo held her gaze for another second, like a painter memorizing the contours of his masterpiece. Model. Feels. With his departure, the world went silent. His footsteps faded on the marble, the private elevator doors sealing the quiet. In that moment, Lily was an island in a vast dressing room. Feels. Encircled by expensive garments that hung like the elegant specters of a life she now wore. A profound disquiet began to surface within her, a sense of atmospheric pressure dropping just before a storm. She attempted to dismiss it as mere anxiety. Feels. A ripple in the placid surface of her day. Shop, go home, wear the red dress, dine with her husband. A perfect sequence. But Lily Carter was standing on the precipice of an abyss, entirely unaware of the catastrophic fall to come. 2 hours on, Feels, a black Maybach would arrive, silent as a shark before Saks on Fifth Avenue. Feels. Nico opened the door for Lily, his gaze sweeping the street with surgical precision before he signaled. It was clear. On the opposite side of the vehicle, Dante stood as a sentinel. Together, in their dark suits, Feels, they formed a protective barrier around her. As Lily emerged, the December air met her with a sharp chill. Snow had begun to fall, delicate crystals descending through the air only to vanish on the heated pavement. Feels. She pulled her cashmere coat closer and moved toward the entrance. Christmas at Saks is not merely a holiday, it's an immersive spectacle of excess. Pillars were twined with gold lights, and the ceiling was a galaxy of thousands of crystal stars. Feels, a flawless man-made cosmos. Feels. Dominating the center of the main floor stood a Christmas tree, easily 30 feet high, laden with silver and gold ornaments and ribbons the color of arterial blood. Holiday music drifted from unseen speakers. Feels. A gentle baritone singing of sacred nights. The atmosphere was a rich blend of pine, 100 competing luxury perfumes, and the faint sweet scent of hot chocolate. This was the Christmas of the insulated. Feels. A world where elemental worries like shelter and sustenance simply did not exist. And Lily, even now, felt the faint dissonance of an outsider who had somehow slipped past the gates. She moved past displays of fragrances, Feels, beyond handbags and shoes that represented more wealth than her former life had ever known. Nico and Dante shadowed her, maintaining a careful orbit, near enough to intervene, distant enough to preserve the illusion of freedom. Feels. Lorenzo had orchestrated their movements with his typical precision, mastering the delicate equilibrium between ensuring Lily's security and preventing her from feeling imprisoned. Her pace slowed by the Tiffany & Co. counter, Feels, where diamonds glittered like captured starlight. She was searching for a present for Lorenzo, a paradoxical quest for a man who possessed the means to acquire anything. Yet Lily needed to offer something that was an extension of herself, Feels, an object that would articulate a singular focus on him, a testament to her thought and effort. And then it appeared, a pocket watch, crafted from white gold, its design a study in classic simplicity. Feels. The interior of its cover was an unblemished canvas, awaiting her inscription. She knew the words instantly. My heart. It was her private name for him, the counterpoint to his constant claiming of her as his. Feels. She signaled a sales associate, and the transaction was completed swiftly. The gift was placed within a box of deep blue velvet, secured with a silver ribbon. A genuine smile touched Lily's lips as she clutched the small bag. Feels. Already imagining Lorenzo's face. the distinct way his dark eyes would soften, a transformation reserved solely for her. She continued her shopping, selecting items for Marco, for Nico and Dante, for this makeshift security detail that had, feels, over the past 2 years become a kind of family. This marked her first Christmas with the agency to give back. The first time she was not on the periphery of a life like this, observing a world she could never enter. Feels. She was exiting the jewelry department, her arms laden with bags, when she saw him, and the world fractured. Time ceased its forward motion. There, at the Louis Vuitton display less than 50 feet from her, sharing a laugh with a blonde woman, Feels, stood the ghost she had spent years burying, Derek Sullivan, the man who had deconstructed her piece by piece, the man who had stolen everything, the architect of her unborn child's death, with his fists and his fury. He was here. Feels. It felt like a tear in reality, as if the underworld itself had opened to expel its most personal demon just to torment her once more. The bags nearly slipped from her nerveless fingers. Her feet felt welded to the polished floor. She was suspended. Feels, unable to act, unable to 4 years. Feels. For 4 years she had waged a war to entomb that face in the deepest catacombs of her memory. For 4 years she had painstakingly reconstructed a life from the rubble he had left behind. Feels. 4 years spent convincing herself that he held no dominion over her. Yet it took only a single glance. The sight of that blonde hair, that self-satisfied smile, Feels. The posture of a man who believed he owned any space he occupied, and every defense she had erected disintegrated. The memories were not a recollection. They were a tsunami, a violent, inescapable surge. She saw herself in her early 20s, Feels, still reeling from the crash that had claimed her parents, living under the thumb of a resentful aunt. He had entered her life as a savior, handsome and charming, speaking the precise words her shattered spirit was desperate to absorb. Feels. He vowed to be her shield, her love, her family reborn, and in her youth and desperation, she consumed every syllable of his poison. She remembered the first time his hand struck her, a sudden slap for a minor lateness. She remembered his tears afterward, Feels, his pleas for forgiveness, his oaths that it was an aberration, and she chose to believe. The second time followed, then the third, then the 10th, until the violence became a brutal rhythm, the backdrop to her life. The punches, the kicks, Feels. The nights he would drag her by the hair, the nights she hid, trying to silence her own sobs because the sound of her crying only fueled his rage. The mornings she would face the mirror and fail to recognize the bruised, swollen mask staring back. Feels. She remembered discovering she was pregnant. It was a singular point of light in an endless darkness. A fragile hope that a child might be the catalyst for his transformation, that they could finally become a family. But when she told him, Feels, his face contorted not with joy but with rage. He saw it as a cage, a trap, and then he struck her abdomen. That was the first time he targeted the life within her, but it would not be the last. She remembered the coldest night of that year, Feels, when he learned she had tried to contact the police, a call she hadn't even completed. How he had torn her from their bed and thrown her outside in only a thin nightgown, his voice a roar, demanding that she run. Feels. Every survival instinct screamed for flight, for invisibility, for a simple, frantic escape. But her body refused the command. Her feet felt rooted to the spot, a profound numbness spreading through her as a ghost from her former life glided closer. Feels. He wore that same smile she once adored, a smile that now churned her stomach with a reflexive wave of revulsion. Nico and Dante perceived the shift in her posture immediately. From her periphery, Lily saw them begin to close in, Feels, but she stopped them with the barest shake of her head. Not yet. She would not create a scene. She denied Derek the satisfaction of seeing her terror. He paused a short distance away, his gaze moving over her with a slow, violating appraisal. Feels. The years had sharpened his handsome features, perhaps, encased in a sleek gray suit with a Rolex at his wrist, but Lily knew the truth of what lay beneath. A beautiful facade constructed to hide the monster. Feels. The very monster whose personal hell she had somehow endured for 3 entire years. He parted his lips, and the voice that emerged was the same saccharine poison she remembered. "Well, what do we have here?" he began. "Lily Carter, Feels." He remarked that he'd never expected to find her in such an opulent setting, imagining she was likely still scavenging for meals somewhere. Lily fought to keep her composure, her voice steady as she told him she had nothing to discuss with him, Feels. She attempted to step around him, but Derek deliberately blocked her way. A cruel smirk warped his features. "What's the rush? It's not often one runs into an old acquaintance. Can't spare a moment to catch up." His focus then shifted, feels, fixating on her luxury coat, the Hermes handbag, and the collection of designer shopping bags at her side. Feels. A dark, venomous emotion flickered in his eyes. "Ah," he said, his voice saturated with contempt. "I see how it is." It was the sound of pure hatred. "Looks like you found another fool to sink your claws into. That was always your gift, wasn't it?" Feels. Playing the helpless little victim until you could bleed someone dry. A surge of rage flared in Lily's cheeks, but she suppressed it. She told him he knew nothing of her life. Derek threw his head back and laughed, a loud, feels, ugly sound that echoed in the refined space, drawing stares. "I know enough," he snarled. "I know precisely what you are. A parasite that attaches itself to men. You were nothing when I found you, and it appears you've simply found a new host." Feels. He moved closer, his voice sinking to a menacing whisper, demanding to know the identity of this new mark. Was he wealthy? And did this man have any idea he was sleeping with the refuse Derek himself had discarded? Feels. Lily's hands trembled, and she despised herself for it, hated the fact that after 4 years this man could still elicit a physical tremor of fear. Her knuckles were stark white as she gripped the handle of her Hermes bag. She met his gaze directly, Feels, her voice low but clear, reminding him that he was the one who had destroyed her life, who had laid his hands on her, who had cast her out into a blizzard. He had no right to assume the posture of the wronged party. Feels. Derek simply arched an eyebrow in a performance of theatrical surprise. He hadn't beaten her, he countered. He had disciplined her. She was always so prone to melodrama, wasn't she? Forever casting herself as the damsel in distress, Feels, seeking an audience for her suffering. He then cocked his head, his eyes dripping with condescension, and conceded that she did, at least, look a little better. Feels. The pallor of a ghost had at least receded from her features. Her benefactor was clearly providing for her. A knot of acid formed in Lily's stomach. She felt the urge for violent catharsis, the phantom sensation of her palm striking his face, Feels, of revealing the grotesque reality behind the carefully sculpted mask of civility. Yet she remained static, motionless. Her hands trembled as she fought back the tears, denying him the victory of witnessing her unravel. 4 years prior, she had begged. Feels. 4 years prior, she had knelt, a shattered woman pleading for him not to abandon her. He would never be granted a glimpse of that person again. It was then that a blonde materialized at Derek's side, her sharp crimson nails staking a claim on his arm, Feels, and a contained fire threatened to become an inferno. Feels. The blonde conducted a visual inventory of Lily, her gaze appraising and dismissive, as if inspecting damaged goods. She was statuesque, rail-thin, with lips augmented by fillers and a nose so unnaturally perfect it was clearly purchased. Feels. She wore a Chanel dress and was adorned with diamonds, but no amount of wealth could conceal the ugliness that emanated from her, the pure disdain in her eyes. She inquired of Derek if this was the unhinged ex-girlfriend he lamented. Feels. The one who couldn't accept rejection, the one who haunted his steps. For Lily, the words landed with the force of a physical blow. The obsessed ex, the stalker, the one who refused to let go. Derek had, in fact, told this woman about her, Feels, but he'd inverted the narrative, casting himself as the aggrieved party and Lily as the architect of his torment. Feels. She should have been shocked. She wasn't. This was a quintessential tactic from Derek's playbook, a classic narcissistic maneuver. He actually laughed, encircling the woman's waist as if she were a prize. He confirmed her suspicions. Yes, Victoria, Feels. This was Lily, the woman who had clung to him desperately, who had wept and groveled for a full month after he'd cast her aside. Utterly pathetic. Victoria produced a small, sharp giggle, a sound with the brittle frequency of shattering glass. Feels. How tragic, she declared. There was something uniquely pitiful about women with no sense of self-worth. Lily's fists tightened, her nails digging into her palms. She sensed Nico and Dante stiffen beside her, could feel their protective fury rising, Feels, but she gave a subtle gesture to remain passive. Not yet. Feels. She did not require their intervention just yet. Her eyes met Derek's, her voice unsteady but carrying a razor's edge. Did he tell Victoria, she asked, that Lily pursued him relentlessly? Did he also happen to share that he used to strike her? Feels. That he had abandoned her on the street during the coldest night of that year? Or perhaps the detail about him liquidating her entire inheritance? For a fraction of a second, Derek's composure, fractured before the arrogant mask, snapped back into place. Feels. He sneered, "You see, Victoria, she fabricates these elaborate fictions. She thrives on the victim persona to elicit sympathy. It's her entire methodology. Victoria simply nodded, her expression a mask of revulsion. Feels. She hated women of that sort most of all. Parasites who drained men and then slandered them upon being discarded. Feels. Lily felt the ground give way beneath her. No one ever believed her. Not once. She could present the unvarnished truth, and people would still be seduced by his counterfeit narrative. All because he was handsome, charismatic, Feels, and a virtuoso of manipulation. It was then that a final thread of restraint within her broke. Perhaps it was her patience finally exhausted. Perhaps it was 4 years of agony reaching its boiling point. Feels. Or perhaps it was the ghost of a memory from a subway bathroom floor. When she spoke again, her voice was perfectly level. Had he mentioned their child to Victoria? Did he include the part where she was pregnant at the moment he threw her out? Feels. Did he tell her that she lost their baby, alone in a public lavatory, as a result of exposure and starvation? The atmosphere in the store grew dense, heavy, and unbreathable. Feels. Victoria's gaze darted to Derek. For the first time, an emotion other than contempt registered in her eyes. "What child?" she demanded. Derek remained silent. His face blanched, then flooded with a deep, furious crimson. Feels. His jaw was set so rigidly it seemed on the verge of splintering, his eyes radiating heat. It was an expression Lily recognized with visceral certainty. It was the expression that always preceded the violence. Feels. The look of the monster as its human facade finally disintegrated. Lily pressed her advantage, her voice now like tempered steel. She was lying on that frigid bathroom floor, she said, in a pool of her own blood. Feels. Losing the life they created while he was asleep in the warm apartment her money had paid for. Did he ever think of it? She asked. Did he ever spare a single thought for the child he allowed to die? Derek erupted. He lunged toward her, his eyes wild. Feels, a guttural snarl tearing from his throat. Feels. He screamed for her to be silent, to shut her mouth, insisting he'd never killed anyone, that if she had been pregnant, the child wasn't his, that she was a liar, that she had always been a liar. Then his hand rose, and Lily knew its trajectory intimately. Feels. Her body held the memory her mind fought to suppress. Her muscles knew the arc of that hand, knew the unique sting it would leave in its wake. But this time was different. This time she was not alone. This time she was Lily Marchetti. Feels. The shove struck her before she could process it. The heel of Derek's hand impacted her chest with the accumulated venom of 4 years, launching her backward. Her high heel lost its purchase on the polished marble floor. She knew she was falling. Feels. But she never anticipated the kick. The Ferragamo Oxford on Derek's foot, a $5,000 shoe likely funded by another woman's generosity, collided with her ribs as she lost her balance. A detonation of pain erupted in Lily's chest. Feels. Glass shattered. A scream echoed through the space. It might have been hers. It might have been the other shopper's. Her back slammed into the Tiffany display, and a cascade of crystal holiday ornaments rained down as she collapsed. For a moment, Feels. The world dissolved into searing, white-hot agony. Lily lay there, her cheek pressed against the ice-cold floor, struggling to draw a breath. Each inhalation was a blade twisting deeper into her side. Feels. Blood trickled from a cut on her arm where the broken glass had found her. The cashmere coat Lorenzo adored was torn, and Derek stood over her, his face a portrait of pure disgust, snarling that she should stay down where she belonged. Feels. And then the equilibrium of the scene violently shifted. Nico moved with the sudden, destructive force of a storm. The 29-year-old bodyguard, Lorenzo's own cousin, the man who had pledged his life to her protection, Feels, seized Derek by the collar and ripped him away with a savage cry. Derek had no time to react before his face smashed into a display case, his arm wrenched behind him, his cheek pressed against the glass directly over a bed of diamonds. Feels. Nico held him fast with one hand, drew his weapon with the other, and pressed the cold steel of the barrel to the base of Derek's skull. His voice was glacial, warning him that the slightest movement would result in a bullet through his brain. Feels. Derek groaned, attempting to resist, but Nico simply increased the pressure, forcing a strangled cry of pain from him. Feels. Several feet away, Dante was already on his phone, activating a speed dial. The moment the call connected, he spoke with clinical efficiency, informing his boss that the lady of the house had been assaulted, that she was injured, Feels, and that their location was Saks Fifth Avenue, first floor. Pandemonium had broken out. Patrons were shouting and scrambling for safety. The store employees stood paralyzed. Mall security officers rushed to the scene, Feels, only to halt abruptly at the sight of Nico's firearm. And Victoria just stood there, her face a stark, bloodless white, her mouth agape in a silent scream as she witnessed the man she loved viciously attack a woman, heels, only to be neutralized like an insect under the threat of a gun, heels. Lily fought to sit up, the pain stealing her breath. A sales associate started toward her, but Dante reached her first. He gently lifted her with one arm, his phone still pressed to his other ear, asking if she was all right, if she could stand, heels. Lily managed a nod, though her body was trembling uncontrollably. She then felt the vibration of her own phone in her pocket. Lorenzo was calling. As she watched Derek, immobilized and powerless in Nico's grip, she knew that in approximately 10 minutes, heels, a cataclysm was about to descend upon him. Lily's hand shook so violently she could barely retrieve the phone from her Hermes bag. The screen illuminated with Lorenzo's name, next to the small heart icon she had placed there. Heels. She swallowed, attempting to steady her voice before accepting the call. But the instant her finger touched the screen, before any greeting could be formed, Lorenzo's voice cut through the line. Who? It was a single word, heels, delivered with the finality of a judge, pronouncing a death sentence. His tone was so devoid of warmth that Lily felt a chill transmit through the device. This was not her Lorenzo, not her husband. This was Lorenzo Marchetti, the head of the Mafia, heels, the man who constructed his empire upon the remains of those foolish enough to challenge him. Lily opened her mouth to respond, but what emerged was a sob that tore itself from the depths of her being. 4 years of silence, heels, 4 years of burying trauma, 4 years of insisting on her own strength. In that single moment, the entire elaborate structure of her composure disintegrated. Heels. The dam broke, tears streamed from her eyes, an unstoppable torrent of grief, and she simply wept. She wept for the girl she once was, abandoned and lost. Wept for the woman she was meant to become, now a mere specter of that potential. Heels. She wept for the searing agony in her ribs, for the terror that had been a constant poison in her soul for 4 years, and for the profound humiliation of being struck down before a crowd of indifferent strangers. Lily. Heels. Lorenzo's voice pierced the chaos. The coldness remained, but something far more dangerous was awakening beneath it, something ancient and predatory. It was the growl of a beast rising to defend what was its own. He spoke her name again, heels, a strange fusion of profound softness meant only for her and the gathering force of a storm intended for her aggressor. He asked if she was hurt. He asked who did this to her dot model, heels. Give him the name. Lily's words were fractured by sobs. Derek. She said it was Derek Sullivan. He was there. He had found her, kicked her. On the other end of the line, a chasm of silence opened. 1 second, 2, then 3, heels. It was a stillness far more harrowing than any scream could ever be. She could discern the metered cadence of Lorenzo's breathing, a sound like a predator coiling before the strike. When he finally spoke, his voice was a flat line, stripped of all effect, feels as desolate as a frozen lake, and in that utter void of emotion, a chill crept into Lily's very marrow. He asked if this was the one, the man who had beaten her, left her on the street, the man who had extinguished the life of their unborn child. Heels. All Lily could manage was a whispered affirmation. Yes, a final faint exhalation of air passed through the line. Heels. When Lorenzo spoke again, the man from moments before had vanished, replaced by something else, a presence that had moved beyond mere coldness into the realm of the lethal. Heels. This was the voice of a judge who had already passed a sentence from which there would be no appeal. He would be there in 10 minutes, he stated. He commanded her to remain where she was, and to ensure Nico did not allow Derek to leave. Heels. He was on his way to personally adjudicate the matter. A pause. For a fraction of a second, the facade cracked, the voice softened. He told her to listen. Il mio cuore, my heart. He vowed that no one would ever harm her again. Never. Heels. He swore that Derek would account for his actions, for every last one. Lily wept that she loved him. Lorenzo replied that he loved her too. Heels. The connection was severed. Lily let the phone fall, her gaze returning to Derek, still neutralized in Nico's unyielding grasp. His face was a contorted mask of purpled fury and shame, his mouth still spilling impotent threats. He'd sue, he bellowed. Heels. He'd call the authorities. He'd see them imprisoned, the sheer folly of it. The man possessed no framework for understanding the forces he had just provoked. He could not know that in approximately 10 minutes, Heels, the single most dominant figure in New York's entire criminal hierarchy, would materialize before him. He was oblivious to the fact that his own squalid empire, built on the wreckage of women, was about to be obliterated. Heels. He could never comprehend that for 4 years, Lorenzo had borne witness to Lily's nightmares, tracing the architecture of scars on her skin and in her psyche, and had made a solemn oath that should he ever find the man responsible, that man would curse the very day of his birth. That day had arrived. The countdown had begun. 10 minutes. Just 10. 600 seconds. That was the entirety of the time Derek Sullivan had left as a free man, though he was unaware of his own hourglass. The first minute was defined by his chaotic rage. He was still shouting, still issuing threats. Now he invoked the name of Senator Hayes's daughter, claiming to be her lover, warning them of the consequences. Nico remained impassive. He merely punctuated Derek's struggles by pressing his face more firmly against the glass. Mall security materialized, but they maintained a strategic distance, observing the steel in Nico's hand and calculating that their wages did not cover this particular level of engagement. One guard was on his phone, attempting to reach the police, but the call, for some unknown reason, would not connect. During the second minute, the environment itself began to shift. The main squares of Lax Fifth Avenue slammed shut, an echoing boom, then the side entrances, then every emergency exit. An employee made a futile attempt to reach the elevators, only to find them inert. The escalators ground to a halt. A placid female voice resonated from the store's speakers, announcing a temporary closure due to a security matter and requesting the public's patience. But patience was a scarce commodity. Panic was not. Patrons began to hammer the glass doors, their cries amplifying in the cavernous space. No one understood what was happening. Except for Lily, she understood. This was the projection of Lorenzo's power, an invisible hand closing its grip around the entire structure. In the third and fourth minutes, they began to emerge. From the liminal spaces and shadowed corners one would never ordinarily notice. From doorways Lily had never known were there. At first one, then two, then in small methodical fire teams. Men in stark black suits, their faces devoid of expression, all moving with the chilling precision of a special operations unit. No weapons were visible, but their presence was an undeniable statement. One glance was enough. They were dangerous. They established control over every point of egress, every strategic junction, every balcony that offered a view of the main floor. In the span of 2 minutes, their number had grown to at least 20, with more arriving. Derek's shouting ceased. For the first time, a genuine flicker of fear registered on his face. He craned his neck as far as Nico's hold would permit, his eyes widening at the silent phalanx in black suits creating a perimeter around them. He began to demand answers, asking what was happening, who they were. He received no reply. In the 5th minute, Victoria attempted to contact her father. Her hands trembled so violently she could barely operate her phone. As a senator's daughter, she was accustomed to a life of privilege where difficulties simply vanished, a complete novice in the face of such elemental terror. The call failed to connect. She tried again and again. Her screen broadcast the same message: no signal. Her eyes darted around like a cornered animal's before she bolted toward an exit. A man in a black suit simply moved to intercept her. He said nothing. He offered only a slight shake of his head. Victoria recoiled, the blood draining from her face. During the 6th and 7th minutes, the whispers began. Lily could hear them, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Marchetti. One person uttered the name. Then another repeated it, and a third. The name propagated through the crowd like a contagion. Marchetti, the Marchetti family, the Marchetti Mafia. When the name finally reached Derek's ears, he became utterly still. Lily witnessed the precise instant that comprehension crashed over him like a glacial wave. His eyes dilated, his lips began to quiver. The arrogant flush vanished from his handsome features, leaving behind a pallid, sweat-sheened mask of dread. He knew the name. Everyone in New York knew that name. Marchetti was the syndicate that held half the city in its thrall. It was a name spoken only in hushed tones, a criminal enterprise that even federal agencies approached with extreme caution. And its leader, Lorenzo Marchetti, was the youngest and most ruthless boss in its violent, storied history. Derek began to tremble. The shouting was gone. The threats were gone. All that remained was a thin, quavering voice asking Nico what was happening, why the Marchetti were involved. He called Lily a disturbed homeless woman, insisting she could have no connection to them. Nico emitted a short, frigid laugh, the first sound he had made since the confrontation began. He informed Derek that the disturbed homeless woman was Lily Marchetti, Lorenzo Marchetti's wife, and, he clarified, "You just assaulted the wife of the boss." Derek made a guttural, choking sound. The 8th and 9th minutes elapsed in a dense, suffocating silence. No one spoke, no one moved. The entire ground floor of Saks Fifth Avenue seemed suspended in time. Heels. Collectively holding its breath for the inevitable conclusion. Heels. Derek had ceased all resistance. He hung limply in Nico's grip, shaking uncontrollably, his gaze vacant as if he were already witnessing his own final moments. Victoria had collapsed to the floor, hugging her knees, weeping without a sound. And then, Heels, the 10th minute arrived. The sound of engines erupted from the parking garage below. Not one or two cars, but at least 5, their motors converging into a single menacing roar, the sound of an approaching tempest. A private elevator, Heels, one whose existence Lily had been unaware of, slid open, and Lorenzo Marchetti stepped out. The inferno had arrived in person. Lorenzo Marchetti did not merely exit the elevator like a king entering his court. That analogy is insufficient, Heels. He was the king, and every soul in that building felt that truth in their very bones. He was a solid 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with a physique that seemed hewn from granite and pure force of will. Every motion was an expression of absolute, Heels, indisputable power. The black 3-piece Armani suit was tailored to him like a second skin. His tie, a dark silk red, mirrored the precise shade of aged blood, Heels. His Oxfords were polished to such a high sheen they reflected the terrified faces of those who watched him. His dark hair was slicked back, revealing a high forehead bisected by a thin, Heels, white scar through his left eyebrow, a memento from a territorial war 15 years prior when at 19 he had been forced to kill to see another sunrise. But it wasn't the scar that turned one's blood to ice. It was his eyes. Heels, eyes as black as the interstellar void. Heels. To look into them was to stare into two singularities, pulling in all light and reflecting nothing back. Absolute emptiness, zero mercy. These were the eyes of a man who had not only witnessed death, but had brokered it, commanded it, Heels, more times than could ever be tallied. And at this moment they burned with a cold fire that was palpable on the skin, a radiative heat from a furnace of rage. Behind him, more than 30 men streamed from the elevators, all in black, Heels, all carrying significant firepower beneath their suits, all with faces that looked as if they were carved from stone. They moved as a single calibrated weapon system, fanning out into formation without a single command being uttered, Heels. Leading them was Marco Benedetti, Lorenzo's most trusted consigliere. A man of 45 with salt and pepper hair and the eyes of a raptor. Marco had been at Lorenzo's side since he was just another fatherless kid on the streets. Heels. Marco had been present for Lorenzo's brutal ascension, a witness to an empire sculpted from nothing. He was an architect of the violence that entombed their rivals within the city's very foundations. Now, Heels. His gaze fell upon Derek with the detached scrutiny one affords an insect just before the final, crushing impact. A palpable shift occurred in the atmosphere. The few remaining shoppers flattened themselves against the walls, Heels, an instinctive attempt at invisibility. Employees found sudden, intense interest in the floor, understanding that a single glance could be a fatal error. Some collapsed to their knees, a subconscious genuflection to a power they couldn't name, Heels. The mall security evaporated. They had received the unspoken directive to disappear. Even those oblivious to Lorenzo's identity felt the ambient threat he projected. This was an alpha predator, Heels, and every primal instinct in the room shrieked a single command: make way, Heels. Upon the marble expanse, Victoria saw Lorenzo, and a strangled sob escaped her. She recognized him instantly. How could she not? The daughter of a senator, Heels, she was raised with cautionary tales about men like Lorenzo Marchetti, men whom even the nation's most powerful figures knew to fear. She clawed backward, her nails screeching uselessly against the polished stone, but there was no escape, Heels. Lorenzo's focus, however, was a weapon that shot past her, that vaulted over Derek entirely. His dark eyes were fixed on a singular target. He found Lily. She was standing there, Heels, marked by dried blood on her arm and the salt stains of tears on her cheeks, her coat torn, a hand pressed to her ribs. And in that moment, something fundamental within him simply broke. Heels. The glacial control, the years of practiced indifference, the entire impenetrable fortress of his identity as the Dawn, it all dissolved into mist. For one raw, unguarded second, Lorenzo's expression fractured, revealing not the feared Mafia boss, Heels, but a man watching the person he loves endure pain. A flash of pure agony crossed his eyes, followed by a wave of impossible tenderness. And then came the gutting blow of guilt for his failure to be there. He erased the distance to Lily, Heels. his pace quickening until he stood before her, and then he sank to one knee, a posture of complete surrender, like a king kneeling to his sovereign. His hand, calloused and hardened by the instruments of death, feels, lifted her chin with a reverence that defied its history. He murmured a question, asking where she was hurt. Il mio cuore, my heart. Just show him. Feels. Who did this to you? Whose hands dared to touch you? A tremor entered his voice, and that was a sound none of his soldiers had ever witnessed. Lorenzo Marchetti does not show weakness. He does not tremble, ever. But here before Lily, Feels, he was not the Don. He was a husband shattered by the sight of his wife's injuries. Lily's own tears began to fall, landing on his hand as she confessed the sharp ache in her ribs. Her elbow was bleeding, but it was fine. Feels. She would be fine now that he was here. Lorenzo carefully slid her sleeve upward, his gaze fixating on the gash. His jaw tightened so severely, a muscle spasmed in his neck. He then glanced toward her side, where she held herself, Feels, knowing with certainty that deep bruises were already blooming beneath the fabric. Feels. He squeezed his eyes shut for a single, violent moment, and when they opened again, the tenderness had been incinerated. In its place was the cold fire of damnation. He rose to his feet, a slow, deliberate motion that was a promise of absolute menace. Feels. As he finally pivoted to confront Derek, the ambient temperature in the cavernous hall seemed to plummet 20 degrees. Derek physically recoiled from the force of that gaze. He had felt like a god when he was striking Lily. Feels. He believed he was the one holding all the power. Now, looking into the abyss of Lorenzo Marchetti's eyes, he understood he knew nothing of true dominion. He was about to receive an education from which he would never recover. A subtle nod to Marco, Feels, and the older man with salt and pepper hair stepped forward as Lorenzo addressed him in Italian. The voice was still quiet, but it carried an authority that could pulverize stone, instructing him to get Dr. Feels Chen on the line immediately, and to have her on site in 15 minutes. Her current location and activities were irrelevant. Marco simply inclined his head, phone already pressed to his ear as he retreated. Lorenzo turned his focus back to Lily, Feels, his thumb gently tracing her cheek, erasing the evidence of her tears. He whispered again, a soft inquiry if she was injured anywhere else. He needed a full accounting. Lily just shook her head, insisting it was only her ribs and arm, Feels, that she was truly all right. Lorenzo, however, did not believe her for a second. He knew her too well. He understood her instinct to erect a facade of strength, to minimize her own suffering to shield him from concern. Feels. He shrugged off his own suit jacket and gently settled it over her shoulders, enveloping her in his warmth and familiar scent. Feels. Her own cashmere coat was ruined, torn and smeared with blood, and Lorenzo decided in that instant he would burn it later, along with the entire memory of this cursed place. Lifted her arm once more, studying the cut. His mouth flattened into a hard, Feels, unforgiving line. It was deep. It would require sutures. It would leave a scar, another mark on his wife's skin. It represented another failure on his part, and a fresh tide of self-loathing washed over him. He had made a vow to protect her, Feels, a solemn promise that no one would harm her again, and here he was, confronted with the tangible proof of his inadequacy. He leaned close, pressing a kiss to her forehead, and whispered his apology, that he should have been there. Lily clutched his hand, Feels, insisting it wasn't his fault, that he shouldn't even think it. He was here now. That was the only thing that mattered. Feels. Lorenzo allowed his eyes to close for a moment, pressing his forehead to hers. They simply stood there, an island of two in a world that had ceased to exist. Lily's trembling whisper finally broke the silence, asking if he knew the man's identity. Feels. Lorenzo's eyes opened. Yes, he knew. Dante had provided a complete dossier on the drive over. Derek Sullivan, the specter from Lily's darkest history, the very man his investigators had been hunting for 2 years, a ghost who had vanished from the earth. Feels. The man he had promised to make curse the day of his own birth. And now here he was, not 10 feet away. Trembling, it seemed fate had just served him his vengeance on a silver tray. Lorenzo straightened, Feels, gently brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face one last time before he turned from her. Feels. The instant his back was to her, the transfrain was absolute. The soft contours of his shoulders solidified into plates of armor. His fluid grace hardened into a heavy, deliberate, predatory advance. His features became a blank canvas, Feels, a mask more frigid than the winter air. The true terror, however, was in his eyes. The same eyes that had just held an infinite love for Lily were now vacant, black holes utterly devoid of light or empathy. Feels. This was the Lorenzo Marchetti of underworld legend. The capo who constructed his throne from the skeletons of his foes. The man who once ordered a traitor buried alive simply to hear the sound of dirt striking the coffin. Heels. Each step toward Derek echoed on the marble floor like a funeral drum. At Lorenzo's signal, Nico released Derek, who crumpled into a heap. Heels. Derek scrambled, attempting to rise, but his limbs refused to obey. He could only manage to remain on his knees, shivering, staring up at Lorenzo looming over him like a final judgment. Lorenzo said nothing at first. Heels. He merely looked down at Derek with the profound indifference one reserves for refuse on the street. The silence thickened, becoming a heavy, suffocating presence. Derek's mouth worked, a pathetic sound escaping, but Lorenzo simply raised one finger, heels, and the noise ceased as if he had crushed the man's larynx. Then at last Lorenzo spoke. His voice was a quiet, level monotone, devoid of all emotion, like a magistrate reading a sentence of death. "So," he stated, "you are Derek Sullivan." Heels. Lorenzo then glanced back at Lily. For a fraction of a second, that impossible tenderness returned to his eyes. He asked her, his voice softer but now laced with cold steel, to tell him. Heels. Tell him every single violation that Monster had committed against her. Heels. Lily had to force the words past the mass of emotion constricting her throat. She had spoken of Derek to Lorenzo before, of course. Always in fragmented whispers in the dead of night, after nightmares had torn her from sleep. Heels. And he would simply hold her until the shaking subsided. But she had never shared the full narrative, not the details. She was too afraid of what he might become if he knew the entire sordid truth. Now witnessing Derek kneeling before her husband, Heels, she understood that restraint was over. She took a shuddering breath, the pain in her ribs a sharp testament to every other pain he had inflicted, and she began her testimony. She spoke of the first time Derek struck her, Heels, a slap that split her lip for the crime of being 15 minutes late. She spoke of the second time, the third, the 10th, until the individual moments bled together into a singular, unending horror. Heels. She spoke of curling into a ball on cold bathroom tile, of mornings spent applying layers of foundation to conceal the bruises, of the slow, methodical erosion of her humanity until she felt like nothing more than an object for his rage. Heels. Lorenzo remained perfectly motionless, yet with every truth Lily revealed, a muscle in his jaw would clench violently. She detailed it all, how this parasite Derek had manipulated her into signing away her inheritance, Heels, the legacy her parents had left for her. She explained how Derek began to exert total control over her finances, her friendships, effectively making her a captive within her own home, cut off from any support. Heels. A nerve in Lorenzo's cheek began to twitch, and his hands, hanging at his sides, slowly curled to fists so tight the knuckles turned bone white. Then she delivered the final devastating blow. The day she discovered she was pregnant. Heels. Her voice broke as she recounted her naive hope that a child might somehow mend their broken world. A foolish hope that was obliterated when Derek, for the first time, punched her directly in the stomach. Heels. She continued, her testimony an unbroken chronicle of his brutality. The narrative turned darker as she described her pregnancy, a time when her body became a focal point for his violence. Heels, as if he despised the life within her, even more than the woman who carried it. Lorenzo's eyes remain sealed, but a low, sustained hiss escapes through his teeth. This is not the sound of composure. Heels. It is the audible strain of a man wrestling with an inner beast. She recounts the bleakest night in New York's history, when an attempt to seek help earned her an exile onto the frozen streets, clad only in sleepwear with a mere $5. Heels. She speaks of weeks in a shelter, defined by a persistent hunger, and a cold that settled deep in her bones, culminating in the night she lost their child, alone on the floor of a filthy subway lavatory. Heels. She confesses to moments of wanting to step into oncoming traffic, simply to end the torment. When her story concludes, the room is enveloped in a profound silence. Heels. Lorenzo does not move. He is a study in stillness, yet the very air around him seems to vibrate with a contained ferocity. Derek, in stark contrast, has devolved into a weeping, incoherent mass on the floor, his apologies as empty as his character. Heels. His fiancée, Victoria, is an inert form on the carpet. Abruptly, Lorenzo's eyes open. He approaches Lily, lifts her hand to his lips, and bestows a kiss upon her knuckles with a monarch's reverence. His voice is a murmur, meant only for her. Heels. He asks what fate she desires for Derek. He offers a simple erasure, a word from her, and the man would cease to be. No body, no evidence, no questions. Heels. He would do anything for her, he explains, because any man who harms his world forfeits his own right to exist. Lily gazes into her husband's eyes and sees the terrifying fusion of profound love and homicidal rage burning as one. Feels. She understands the sincerity of his offer. A single nod would guarantee Derek's disappearance before dawn. But she also recognizes a deeper truth. She cannot commission Lorenzo to become a murderer on her behalf. Feels. She cannot bear to live with that specter. She desires suffering for Derek, yes, but not the swift mercy of death. Lily tells Lorenzo no. Her gaze then fixes upon Derek, a look colder than any winter, and she declares that she wants him to live. Feels. To live and be forced to confront the totality of his actions, to lose everything, just as she had. Feels. A slow, deliberate nod from Lorenzo. A chilling smile touches his lips, drawing a whimper from Derek. His voice is a low tremor in the room. As you wish, my heart. Lorenzo then turns to Marco, his tone now glacial. He gives the order to begin. Feels. Immediately. Their contacts at every financial institution were to be called, instructed to freeze every asset at Derek's, not just domestically, but across the globe. Every stock, every holding, Feels. Every single cent was to be liquidated in under an hour. Marco, already pressing his phone to his ear, simply nods, reciting account numbers and authorization codes. As the reality dawns on Derek, his eyes widen in horror. He attempts to rise, Feels. But his limbs fail him, and he collapses back to his knees, screaming that they can't, that it's his money, that they have no right. Feels. Lorenzo pays him no mind, continuing to issue commands with the dispassion of a man ordering dinner. He directs a call to Harrison at Wellington Investments. Derek Sullivan is to be terminated, effective now, for reasons of gross misconduct. Feels. An addendum ensures no other firm on Wall Street will ever employ him again. A pathetic sound escapes Derek. That career was his entire identity, his social standing, his access to the wealthy women he preyed upon. Without it, he is a void. Feels. And then the dam breaks. He erupts into ugly, convulsive sobs, snot and tears twisting his once charismatic face into a grotesque mask of terror. He pleads with Lorenzo to make it stop, promising he's sorry, promising he'll do anything. Feels. Lorenzo remains impassive, his voice an arctic calm. He instructs Marco to compile all evidence of Derek's financial malfeasance and dispatch it to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Feels. This package must include the documents Lily was manipulated into signing 4 years prior. Furthermore, it should contain proof that he defrauded at least 3 other women using an identical scheme. Feels. The case is to be constructed so flawlessly that a federal warrant would be inevitable within 48 hours. Derek emits a raw, primal scream. All semblance of pride has evaporated. He begins to crawl toward Lorenzo. Feels. His hand reaching for a pant leg, crying out that the FBI will let him perish in prison. Nico intercepts him with a sharp kick to the hand, a quiet, efficient gesture to prevent the filth from touching his boss. Feels. At some point during the systematic dismantling, Victoria has regained consciousness. She sits paralyzed, her face ashen, witnessing the complete implosion of a man's life. She looks at Derek, the man she planned to marry, on his knees, utterly broken. Feels. She looks at Lorenzo, the city's most formidable figure, deconstructing a rival's entire world without once raising his voice. Her gaze then settles on Lily. The woman she had minutes earlier, Feels. Dismissed as a delusional stalker, now stands with dried blood on her arm, possessing the profound calm of someone who has already endured the worst and survived. Then Lorenzo speaks Victoria's name. He tells Marco to place a call to Senator Hayes. Feels. The senator must be informed that his prospective son-in-law is a violent, abusive fraud. He instructs him to send the images of Lily's fresh bruises. Send the archived medical files. Make him understand the monster his daughter, Feels, was preparing to wed. Victoria leaps her feet, her complexion shifting from ghostly white to a furious crimson. "What?" she shrieks. "My father? You can't involve him." She whirls on Derek, her eyes lit with fury, demanding to know if it's true. Feels. Did he abuse Lily? Did he steal from her? Was he responsible for the loss of her child? Derek's mouth opens, searching for a plausible denial, but Lorenzo speaks first. His voice remains cold, Feels, but it now carries a shade of pity as he informs Victoria that every word is the truth. That Derek brutalized his wife for 3 years until she miscarried, after which he abandoned her on the streets. He adds that if she remains with this man, Feels, it is only a matter of time before he inflicts the same fate upon her. Feels. Victoria stares at Derek. Derek stares back, and in his eyes she sees the confirmation. It's not in an admission, but in the glaring absence of a denial. In that silent exchange, the carefully constructed facade crumbles, revealing the predator beneath. Feels. Victoria says nothing more, She turns and walks resolutely toward the door, held open by Lorenzo's men. Her walk accelerates into a run. The frantic sound of her heels on the marble floor is the audible signature of panic. Derek screams her name, heels, pleading for her to return, but she is already gone. The heavy door slams shut, a sound that punctuates the end of his future. The senator's daughter, his ultimate prize, has vanished. Heels. It was complete, all of it. His wealth was gone. His career was a ruin. The federal authorities were coming, and his fiancée had just fled from him as if he were a contagion. The entire architecture of his life had been disassembled in under 10 minutes. Heels. Lorenzo finally lowers his gaze to Derek, and a faint smile forms. It holds no warmth. It is the expression of a predator observing prey that is already dead but has not yet realized it. He informs Derek that they are not yet done. Heels. There is one final matter. Lorenzo gives a slight nod to Nico. The bodyguard seizes Derek by the collar and unceremoniously drags his inert form across the floor, depositing him at Lily's feet. Derek offers no resistance. Heels. He is a marionette whose strings have all been severed. Heels. His face was a ruin of tears and mucus. The blue eyes once used to disarm women were now just red-rimmed, swollen pits of abject misery. Nico forced him down at Lily's feet, his head striking the stone floor with a dull, sickening impact. Heels. Lorenzo moved to Lily's side, placing a hand on her back, a gesture that was both protective and possessive. He looked down at the wreckage of the man on the floor, and in a voice like shattered glass, commanded him to get on his knees, to sit upright, heels, and to look his wife in the eyes and apologize. Derek's limbs trembled so violently that he failed twice in the simple act of kneeling. When he finally managed to look up at Lily, their dynamic had, after 4 tumultuous years, heels, undergone a complete and total inversion. Heels. 4 years ago, she had knelt at his feet, pleading with him not to leave. Now he was the one kneeling, looking up at her. Lorenzo's voice cut through the silence again, sharp as a whip. Heels. He commanded Derek to apologize for the first time he ever laid a hand on her. Derek could hardly draw a breath, forcing out a strangled, quavering apology for that initial act of violence. Next, Lorenzo commanded, heels. Apologize for every instance that followed, every punch, every kick, every time you dragged her by her hair. Derek was now weeping uncontrollably, a torrent of tears, stammering apologies for the catalogue of his abuse, confessing he wasn't human, heels, that he was so profoundly sorry, heels. But Lorenzo was far from finished. Apologize for her inheritance, for the money her parents left for her, the money you stole with your deceit. Derek's head fell forward, his entire frame racked with sobs as he apologized for the theft, heels, labeling himself a thief, admitting his guilt, and pleading for her forgiveness. Lorenzo moved closer, his voice dropping to a low register that amplified its menace. Apologize for the child. At these words, the atmosphere in the room turned frigid, heels. Lily felt her own heart seize. This was the wound that had cut the deepest, the one she feared would never mend. Lorenzo pressed on, each word a precision strike, heels. He told him to apologize for striking her abdomen when he was fully aware she was pregnant. Apologize for killing your own child, heels. The child she was never given the chance to know. With that final command, Derek collapsed completely, his forehead pressed to the cold stone. His weeping escalated into a raw, animalistic howl as he begged forgiveness for the baby, heels, calling himself a monster, repeating the word over and over again. Still, Lorenzo did not relent. He ordered him to apologize for the night in January, when he cast her out with $5 and the clothes on her back, heels. The night he left her to die in the New York cold. Derek could no longer form coherent words, only broken, stuttering sobs. And apologize, Lorenzo said, his own voice now heavy with a rage he was only barely containing. Heels. Apologize for making her wish for death. Apologize for making her stand on a curb and contemplate stepping in front of a bus because of what you did. Heels. Apologize, he breathed, the word a venomous hiss. For the fact you almost removed the woman I love from this world before I had the chance to know she existed. At Lily's feet, Derek was a broken thing, his body racked with convulsions. Heels. This was not the arrogant monster who had struck her just 15 minutes prior. This was a ruin of a man, a pathetic form weeping before the very woman he had systematically tortured. Lily gazed down at him. She braced for the rush of vindication, heels, the surge of triumph she had fantasized about, seeing the architect of her misery brought so devastatingly low. It never arrived. In its place, a profound, hollow emptiness consumed her, and a deep weariness settled in. Heels. This sobbing creature on the floor had made her pray for death, had stolen her child and her youth, leaving behind wounds that might never truly heals. And yet there he was, on his knees weeping like a child. This was the man whose presence once stole the very air from her lungs. But looking at him now, all she could summon was pity. She turned away, taking Lorenzo's hand, her voice quiet as she said it was over. She simply wanted to go home. For a fleeting instant, the brutal darkness in Lorenzo's eyes softened as he looked at her and gave a nod. But then his attention swiveled back to Derek. One final piece of business, His shadow fell across the weeping man, a cold eclipse over a soul already damned. When he spoke, his voice was low, yet it carved through the room, each word a spike sealing a coffin. "You have 24 hours to leave the United States," he said. Not 36, not 48, 24. The clock is now running. He let the silence hang, allowing the sheer weight of that decree to pulverize what little remained of Derek's spirit. "If, after that time has elapsed, you are still on American soil," he continued, "my associates will locate you. And on that occasion, I will not be consulting my wife for her opinion. The decision will be mine, and you will curse the day you were ever born." Lorenzo leaned closer, his voice sinking to a conspiratorial whisper meant only for Derek. "And should you imagine there is some corner of the world where you can hide from me, you are tragically mistaken. I have resources on every continent, in every major city, in every foul burrow you could possibly crawl into. If you run, you will be found, and when you are, I will mail your bones to your mother in a sequence of Christmas packages." Lorenzo straightened up, dusting his hands as if he'd just touched something foul, and ordered Nico to release him. Nico stepped back. For a moment, Derek remained a heap on the floor, seemingly unable to process that freedom was actually being offered. Then his head lifted slowly, his eyes wide with the raw panic of a cornered animal that has just seen its cage door swing open. Lorenzo uttered a single word, "Go," and he went. He scrambled to his feet with an impossible, graceless speed and simply fled. He ran as if hell itself were at his heels, sprinting past the stone-faced men in suits who parted for him like a human sea, their faces masks of contempt. He ran for the emergency exit, propped open in anticipation of his departure. Never once looking back, never breaking his stride, just running. His form disappeared through the doorway, and that was the last time Lily ever saw Derek Sullivan. A strange, heavy silence descended upon the entire first floor of Saks Fifth Avenue. No one moved, no one spoke a single word. It was as if every person there had just witnessed some ancient, terrifying ceremony that could never be spoken of again. Lorenzo turned to Lily, and the cold-blooded killer vanished from his face completely. He approached her, wrapping his arms around her with immense care, mindful of her injured ribs, and whispered, "It is finished, anima mia. He will never lay a hand on you again. Ever." Lily collapsed against his chest, listening to the solid, steady rhythm of his heart as she began to weep. These weren't tears of fear or of pain. This was the torrent of pure release. The psychic weight of 4 unbearable years was finally lifted. A dark chapter of her life had just been slammed shut. Lorenzo kissed the crown of her head and gently guided her toward the private elevator. His men moved in unspoken coordination, clearing a silent path. Marco followed close behind, phone pressed to his ear as he finalized the last of the arrangements. As they stepped into the lift, Lily glanced back one final time. Her blood was a dark abstract against the white marble. Shattered crystal glittered beneath the festive lights. But Derek was gone, and with his departure, the ghost that had haunted her for so long had vanished too. The doors slid shut, and Lily Carter Marchetti departed Saks Fifth Avenue, held securely in the arms of the man who loved her more than life itself. A new beginning was underway. The motorcade returned them to the penthouse in absolute silence. Lily remained curled in Lorenzo's arms for the entire journey, his heartbeat a quiet lullaby in her ear. Sarah Chen was waiting for them when they arrived. She was a woman in her 40s with short black hair and the calm, unflappable demeanor of someone long accustomed to managing the Marchetti family's particular brand of crisis. She attended to Lily's injuries with practiced efficiency, placing 12 neat stitches in her elbow, taping her bruised ribs, and administering medication for the pain. She advised rest. Through it all, Lorenzo stood by, his gaze never leaving Lily for a single second. His face was a taut mask of controlled anxiety, tightening every time she winced in pain. After the doctor left, Lorenzo carried Lily to their bedroom, placing her on the bed as if she were made of priceless, fragile glass that could shatter at the slightest touch. He lay down beside her, gathering her into his arms, and they simply remained there in the quiet, heels, listening to the winter wind rage outside their window, listening to the sound of each other breathing, heels. And then Lily began to speak. She told him he deserved the entire truth. Not just the fractured pieces she cried out during nightmares, but the whole story, from its innocent beginning to its violent conclusion. Lorenzo said nothing, heels. He simply held her closer. So she talked. She spoke of a happy childhood in a small town near Boston, of a little house with a flower garden and family dinners filled with laughter. And then she spoke of the car accident when she was 16, heels. A truck had lost control on the interstate, plowing into her parents' car, killing them both on impact. She became an orphan in the blink of an eye. She talked about the aunt, her mother's sister, who took her in solely for the government stipend, heels. She described 6 years of being treated like hired help, cooking and cleaning while her cousins were indulged like royalty, enduring cutting remarks and sharp slaps for any mistake, and the profound, heels, corrosive loneliness that became her constant companion, heels. And then she told him everything, every detail about Derek. She met him in a little coffee shop when she was 22, just after she had finally gained access to her inheritance. He was, of course, handsome, a master of charm, heels. He fed her all the sweet affirmation she had been starved for after 6 years of being told she was worthless. He called her beautiful. He told her she was worthy of love. He promised her his eternal protection, and she, heels, so young and so profoundly desperate for a gentle touch, believed every single word. She was living with him within 3 months. She signed every document he put in front of her without a second glance, believing he was managing her finances, heels, never suspecting he was systematically draining her inheritance into his own accounts, never guessing that she was signing away her entire future. By the time the truth dawned on her, it was far too late, heels. That was the first time he ever laid a hand on her, heels, and it was the beginning of 3 years of absolute hell. The beatings, the night he threw her out on the street, the loss of their child. But she had never told Lorenzo what happened the next morning, when she woke up in a hospital after being found unconscious in a subway station restroom, hemorrhaging. The morning the doctors told her that she had lost the baby, and that she might never be able to conceive, heels, children again. That was the day her world ceased to have color. She was discharged 2 days later. With no one waiting for her and nowhere to go, she drifted through New York like a specter until on the 3rd day, heels, she found herself standing on a street corner, watching the blur of traffic. One step, she thought. One single step, and all of this would be over. She lifted her foot, poised to end it all, when a hand shot out, gripped her coat, heels, and violently pulled her back from the curb. It was a homeless man, the only person in the entire city who had truly seen her. He saved her life. He flagged down an ambulance. She found herself back in the hospital, heels, but this time she was admitted to the psychiatric ward. She remained there for 3 weeks, refusing to speak, refusing to eat, refusing to be alive, heels. And then, like a scene from a film, Lorenzo appeared. He was there visiting one of his own men but pressed the wrong elevator button, ending up on her floor by mistake. He saw her through the small glass window in her door, sitting on her bed, heels, staring into space with utterly vacant eyes. She was so thin, so pale, a ghost of a girl. He never could explain why, but in that moment he was captivated. He found he could not simply walk away, so he returned the next day, and the day after that, heels, and every day that followed. At first, she wouldn't even acknowledge his presence, but he persisted. He would just sit in the room with her for hours, sometimes reading, sometimes simply existing beside her. A quiet, unwavering presence, heels. He never pressured her to talk, never asked a single question. A month later, she finally spoke to him. Her first words were, "Why do you keep coming back?" heels. And Lorenzo, a man synonymous with ruthlessness, the formidable head of the Marchetti crime family, gave her the most honest answer he could. He confessed he didn't have a reason, only a compulsion, an undeniable pull. On the days they were apart, heels, he felt as if a fundamental part of him had been carved out. This right here was the genesis of their story. A year passed and they were husband and wife. Now 2 years since their wedding, heels. Nestled within the security of his embrace atop a Manhattan skyscraper, Lily finally revealed her entire past. A heavy silence hung between them for a long time. He simply drew her closer, heels, whispering his profound gratitude for the homeless man who had saved her. He then told her softly that he'd already located the man weeks before. He'd provided him with a permanent home and a lifelong pension, a guarantee against the cold and hunger, feels. Because Lorenzo admitted, without that man's intervention, their paths would never have crossed, feels, and his existence would have remained a hollow echo, the feeling of a missing soul. Lily's tears began to fall then, and Lorenzo met each one with a kiss. They remained there in the quiet darkness, two fractured individuals who, against all odds, feels, had found one another and were now, piece by piece, mending the breaks in each other. 3 days after the confrontation at Saks, Christmas Eve arrives. The penthouse, perched at the apex of Manhattan's highest tower, feels, is a spectacle of festive elegance. A Christmas tree nearly 10 feet tall dominates the living room. Pillars are entwined with gold lights, and the air is thick with the scent of cinnamon and vanilla from 100 candles, feels. Beyond the sprawling windows, snow descends, a silent ballet in the glow of the city. This was never going to be one of the ostentatious galas other families hosted. Lorenzo despised such performative drama. This was something else. A quiet, feels, intimate dinner for the few people he truly considered his own, feels. Positioned at the head of the table to Lorenzo's left sat Marco Benedetti, the man with salt and pepper hair who had been his confidant for 15 years, the closest thing to a father Lorenzo ever knew. Nico and Dante were seated together, feels. Young in years but old in experience, men who had cemented their loyalty with blood and sacrifice. Across from Lily, Father Antonio, the 65-year-old priest from a church the Marchettis had patronized for generations, feels, offered her a gentle smile. He was the one who had officiated their clandestine wedding 2 years prior, before this very same small circle of witnesses. The dinner itself was imbued with a warmth these men rarely experienced, feels, filled with shared laughter and old memories. Marco began to recount embarrassing childhood anecdotes about Lorenzo, causing the most feared man in New York to flush as if caught in a moment of boyish mischief, feels. Nico and Dante engaged in a heated debate over sports loyalties, nearly coming to blows before Lily diffused the tension with a peace offering of her homemade apple pie. Father Antonio offered a blessing, his voice a quiet current reminding them of the season's true meaning, love, redemption, and the possibility of a new start, feels. Later, as the dessert plates were cleared, Lorenzo rose, a glass of red wine in his hand. An immediate hush fell over the room. Every eye was fixed on him as he surveyed the faces of his crew, the unwavering few who had weathered every storm by his side, feels. His gaze ultimately settled on Lily, and his voice took on a warmth, a tone he reserved for almost no one. He acknowledged his own limitations with words, a truth they all understood. He was a man more adept at issuing commands than baring his soul, feels. More skilled in crafting threats than expressing the contents of his heart. But on this night, this Christmas, he had to make an attempt. For the woman who had fundamentally reoriented his entire existence. He looked at Lily, feels, his dark gaze softening in a way it only ever did for her, and conceded that before her he was merely surviving. He would wake, execute the day's brutal necessities, and return to an empty bed. It wasn't a life, feels. He had influence, he had wealth, he held the city in a grip of fear, but he had no one waiting for him at home. No one who inspired him to be more than the monster he had become, feels. And then she collided with his world. A delicate, pale woman sitting by a hospital window, her eyes reflecting a world that had surrendered all hope. Yet somehow she had reached into the frozen cavity of his chest and commanded his heart to beat once more, feels. He lifted his glass to her, his voice trembling almost imperceptibly as he admitted he was unworthy of her. He knew it. He was a killer, a criminal whose life was measured in violence, and despite it all, she had chosen to love him, to remain, feels. And for every day that followed, he had strived to build himself into a man who could deserve that gift. Then a genuine smile, a true rarity, broke across his features as he said, "And tonight, I have some news for you all." He glanced at Lily, feels, before letting his eyes drift down to her stomach. "Dr. Chen gave us the confirmation this morning. Lily is pregnant," feels. For a single suspended moment, the silence in the room was absolute, a frozen tableau of disbelief. Then the space erupted. Marco was on his feet instantly, enveloping both Lorenzo and Lily in a fierce embrace, feels, tears openly tracing paths down his weathered face. The hardened enforcer suddenly transformed into a child receiving the one gift he'd always dreamed of. Nico and Dante were shouting, clapping each other on the back in a shared explosion of joy, feels. Father Antonio made the sign of the cross, his lips moving in a quiet prayer of gratitude. And Lily, she just sat there, her trembling hands resting on her stomach, tears of pure, Feels unadulterated shock and joy cascading down her face as she looked at Lorenzo. The doctors had told her it was a long shot, that a child might be an impossibility after the damage Derek had done. But this was real. A miracle. Feels. A small life was taking root inside her, the ultimate proof of their love, offering a future she had long ago believed was stolen from her. Feels. Lorenzo knelt beside her chair, his own hand covering hers on her pregnant stomach, and whispered, "You have given me everything." And in that moment, on a snow-dusted Christmas, Feels, Lily finally permitted herself to believe that happiness was something she was allowed to have. 3 months pass. The grip of winter has loosened, yielding to spring, and Lily's pregnancy has begun to show. Feels. She now stands before a 4-story building in Brooklyn, her heart hammering against her ribs. A brass plaque is affixed to the door, its inscription clear, Rising Phoenix Foundation. Below the words, an engraving of a phoenix ascending from flames. Feels. This was it. The culmination of a 2-year dream, a purpose forged in the fires of her own private hell, now intended to be a sanctuary for others. Feels. Lorenzo had presented her with the building itself on Christmas, the deed, the keys, a quiet, monumental gift. Feels. He then commissioned the best architects and security experts to convert it into a veritable fortress for women who were abused and forsaken. It contained 20 private residential suites, each with its own bathroom. Feels. A spacious communal living area, a professional-grade kitchen, and a resource center for learning skills like computing and culinary arts. It also housed a therapy room and a daycare. Feels. Enabling mothers to rebuild their lives while their children were cared for. The cost for residents? Nothing. It was all entirely free. Today marked the official opening. Reporters were present, cameras flashing relentlessly. Feels. City officials posed for the requisite ribbon-cutting ceremony. But the true guests of honor, the first women who would find refuge here, were already inside. Feels. Lily approached the microphone, one hand resting on her 4-month baby bump, surveyed the crowd, and began to speak. She told them that 4 years ago, she was where they were, that this very foundation was built to save women just like her, broken. Feels. Stripped of everything, and discarded on the street with only $5. She spoke of losing her first child to the unforgiving cold and to starvation. She described standing on a street corner, Feels, convinced that ending her life was the only viable escape. The entire crowd fell into a deep silence, every person captivated, her voice wavering but never once breaking. She recounted how she endured that ordeal in complete isolation, no safety net. Feels. No one to call, no one to insist that her story was not yet over. But the women who would pass through these doors, they would never face that kind of solitude. Here, they would have a home. They would have support. Feels. They would have a tangible opportunity to piece their lives back together. And the reason? The Rising Phoenix Foundation was erected on a single, unwavering principle. Every woman is worthy of a second act. Feels. Every woman deserves the chance to rise from the ashes of her past. Feels. She concluded her speech with a pledge that they would no longer fight their battles alone, because she would be there, fighting alongside them. The response was immediate and overwhelming. A thunderous wave of applause. Lily's gaze found Lorenzo, Feels, standing apart in the shade, deliberately avoiding the cameras, content to be her silent anchor. He offered the slightest of nods, but his eyes conveyed a universe of pride. Later, Lily met Maria, the foundation's first official resident, Feels. A 32-year-old mother, her 2 small children clinging to her legs. The faint shadows of bruises still circled her eyes. Her husband had emptied their joint bank accounts and vanished, leaving her submerged in debt with no place to turn. Feels. Lily took Maria's hand, met her gaze directly, and told her that she understood that feeling intimately. She vowed that they would navigate this together, that she would support her every step of the way. Feels. Maria broke down, collapsing into Lily's embrace, and in that exchange, Lily understood. All the suffering, every moment of agony, it had been refined into a purpose. She had effectively weaponized her own scars. Feels. She had transformed her personal nightmare into a beacon for others. Lorenzo observed this from a distance, watching his wife hold a complete stranger with a compassion that was pure and unconditional. Marco, standing beside him, Feels, murmured that she was truly remarkable. Lorenzo simply nodded, his focus never wavering from Lily. "She is my phoenix," he said, his voice low. "She rose from her own ashes, and now she is teaching others how to fly." Feels. 6 months after the foundation opened, Lily is heavily pregnant, the baby's arrival imminent. An email appears in her inbox from an unrecognized address. She nearly deletes it, but the subject line makes her freeze. It contains only 3 words. Heels from Derek Sullivan. Heels. For a brief searing moment, her heart contracts, but it isn't fear. Not this time. It is a different sensation altogether. She opens the message. He acknowledges he possesses zero right to contact her, that he is unworthy of even having his words read. Heels. He explains that he saw news of her foundation and felt compelled to reach out. He wanted her to understand his pride in her, for taking the most horrific acts he had committed and transforming them into something powerful and good. Heels. He reveals his location is Mexico, where he works as a waiter, barely getting by. He is attending therapy, attempting to deconstruct the man who became the monster that nearly broke her. He asks for nothing, knowing forgiveness is an impossibility. Heels. He just wanted to express that she is deserving of every success coming to her, and that he genuinely hopes for her happiness. Heels. After reading the last word, Lily simply sits in the silence for a long while. She waits for an emotional response. Rage, a pang of old pain, even triumph, anything at all. But there is only a void, a complete stillness. Heels. The thought of him now is like recalling a minor character from a novel she read years ago. When Lorenzo enters, he asks if she is all right. Without speaking, she hands him the phone. His expression remains impassive as he reads the entire message. Heels. He then poses a single, direct question. How does she feel? She admits that she feels free, as if the final, sordid chapter of some cheap book has finally concluded. He holds no dominion over her anymore, not enough to even warrant her hatred. Heels. She deletes the email without response, then erases his contact information, removing the last digital trace of Derek Sullivan from her life. Feels. Lorenzo simply draws her into a deep embrace, whispering again and again how proud he is. Proud of her strength. Proud of her capacity to release the past and continue her journey forward. They never uttered Derek's name again. 1 year later. Feels. It's a brisk autumn day in Manhattan, the city awash in golden leaves. Lily stands at the penthouse window, cradling her 1-year-old daughter, Hope Marchetti, a name chosen for its meaning, hope for the future, hope for a new beginning. Feels. Hope for a love so powerful it can mend any wound. The child has her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes, a perfect fusion of them both. She is deeply asleep against her mother's chest, a tiny hand clutching the fabric of her shirt. Feels. Lily gazes out at New York City, the same city where she once faced starvation on a desolate corner. It is now her domain, the arena where she fought her way back from total annihilation. Feels. In the past year alone, her Rising Phoenix Foundation provided aid to over 200 women, with expansions planned for new shelters in Chicago and Los Angeles. The life she once believed herself too damaged to deserve is now tangible, real, feels, and warm in her arms like her slumbering child. A soft chime announces the arrival of the private elevator, footsteps she knows by heart. Lorenzo enters, still clad in his Armani work armor after a demanding day, feels, but his entire demeanor softens the moment he sees them. He presses a kiss to Hope's forehead before finding Lily's lips, asking about her day. She smiles. Perfect, she says. Everything is finally, absolutely perfect. Feels. It is then that Lorenzo retrieves a small crimson velvet box from his pocket and places it in her hand. Feels. She opens it and for a moment forgets to breathe. Nestled inside is an exquisitely delicate rose gold chain. From it hangs a phoenix taking flight from a fire, its wings intricately detailed with tiny rubies that seem to smolder like embers. Feels. As Lorenzo fastens it around her neck, he whispers that she is his phoenix, the one who traversed hell and emerged on the other side, not merely intact, but stronger and more formidable than he could have ever conceived. He tells her he loves her, feels, that he will love her until his last breath is gone, and even after. The tears that trace paths down Lily's cheeks are not of sorrow anymore. They are born from a joy so potent it's almost painful. She tells him she loves him, feels, and this small family they have built, more than life itself. They stand together by the window, the three of them, watching the city lights begin to ignite as millions below live out their own stories. Feels. And here, high in one of the city's tallest towers, a woman who once prayed for an ending now holds her daughter close, held in turn by a man who loves her beyond measure. Derek's entire purpose had been to shatter her, to extinguish her identity, feels, to see her spirit perish on the pavement. He failed. She endured, she rose. She discovered a love that was not a cage but a boundless sky, and in doing so became a version of herself she had never dared to imagine. Now, feels, she is the one who reaches back into that darkness to pull others out. Lily's life stands as a testament to a harsh but beautiful truth. It does not matter how far you are pushed down or how much is stripped away until you feel like an empty shell. Feels. You can rise again. You can find a single spark and forge your pain into a shield for others. It is never ever too late to begin anew. It is never too late for hope. Feels. And if you are out there hearing this and you recognize that particular brand of desperation, please know that you are not unseen. Reach out, let someone help. You must believe in the resilience you do not yet realize you possess, because it is there. Feels. You are worth so much more than you have been led to believe. You are worthy of happiness. You are worthy of a love that helps you heal. And one day, I promise, you will feel yourself rising from the ashes, a true phoenix. Feels. Thank you for following the story of Lily and Lorenzo to its conclusion. If this narrative resonated with you, if it brought a tear to your eye or even a smile to your face, we ask that you support our work by subscribing. Like and share this video. Feels. It may find its way to someone else who needs to hear this very message tonight. And please, leave a comment below. We want to know what you felt. Feels. We genuinely want to hear from you. Every comment, every share, acts as a signal flare, allowing us to continue creating narratives like this. We wish you health, tranquility, joy, and love for all the days to come. And please, never forget, regardless of how dark things may seem, you always possess the power to rise again. Just as she did. We leave you with that thought for now. We hope you will join us again for the next story, which is already waiting to be told.